In the early years of World War II, the Atlantic Ocean was a graveyard in the making. Convoys vanished without warning. Merchant ships burned through the night. Entire crews disappeared beneath black waves, leaving behind only oil slicks and unanswered questions. German U-boats ruled the sea, striking with terrifying precision, then melting back into the depths before anyone could respond. To most Allied commanders, the problem was simple but brutal. The U-boats always seemed to know where the convoys were. No matter how carefully routes were planned, no matter how often schedules changed, the enemy kept showing up. Radar was limited. Sonar was unreliable. Air cover was thin. Every escort captain knew the truth, but hated saying it out loud. The enemy was outsmarting them. And while admirals argued over new technologies and intelligence failures, one man watched quietly from the lowest rung of the naval hierarchy. He was not an officer. He had no command authority, no access to secret briefings. He was a cook, assigned to a convoy escort ship. His job was simple: keep tired sailors fed while they hunted submarines they could barely detect. He spent his days in a hot, cramped galley, peeling potatoes, boiling ration meat, and listening to rumors echo through steel corridors. Every night, he heard the same sounds: distant explosions, rushing footsteps, the dull thud of depth charges. And every morning, he saw the same thing: another ship missing. The cook noticed something others didn't. Between convoy attacks, the sea was never truly empty. It spoke in subtle signs: floating debris, oil streaks, birds gathering where they shouldn't. Sailors ignored these details. Officers dismissed them as coincidence. But the cook had grown up near the coast. Before the war, he had worked on fishing boats. He understood the ocean in a way charts never could. And one day, as he stood on deck dumping kitchen waste overboard, a thought crossed his mind. A dangerous thought. He watched gulls dive instantly toward the scraps. He watched fish break the surface. And he watched how quickly life gathered around even the smallest disturbance. Then he remembered something he had overheard weeks earlier. A young officer complaining that German U-boats always seemed to sniff out convoys, even when radio silence was maintained. That's when it clicked. U-boats didn't just hunt with machines. They hunted with patterns: floating waste from ships, birds circling above feeding fish, changes on the ocean's surface. To a submarine commander scanning the horizon through a periscope, these signs were as valuable as a radio transmission. They pointed toward convoys like arrows. And suddenly, the cook realized something chilling. Allied ships were betraying themselves. Every day, ships dumped food scraps, trash, and waste into the ocean, unknowingly creating a trail of signals visible for miles. Birds gathered, fish followed, and German U-boats learned exactly where to wait. The cook understood the implication immediately. If scraps could lead U-boats to convoys, then scraps could also be used to mislead them. The idea was insane. Who would believe that a cook could interfere with submarine warfare using kitchen waste? Certainly not the officers. When he quietly mentioned his theory to a petty officer, the man laughed. "You think potato peels are beating U-boats now?" The cook said nothing more, but he didn't forget the idea. Instead, he observed. He watched when waste was dumped. He noted bird behavior. He tracked convoy movements and attacks. And slowly, a plan began to form. One that didn't involve weapons, codes, or orders. Only timing. Only patience. Only understanding how the enemy fought. Because the cook didn't want to destroy U-boats. Not yet. He wanted something far more valuable. He wanted to make them blind. And if he was right, then the Atlantic War was about to change. Not because of a new machine, but because one man dared to see the ocean differently. The cook knew one thing for certain. If he went to an officer and said, "Sir, kitchen scraps are helping U-boats find convoys," he would be laughed out of the room. So he didn't ask for permission. He experimented. Quietly. The opportunity came during a long Atlantic crossing, when the convoy had been rerouted 3 times in a single week. Radio silence was strict. Escorts were tense. Everyone expected an attack. That morning, as usual, the cook carried a bucket of waste up to the deck. But this time, he didn't dump it where he was supposed to. Instead of tossing scraps directly overboard, he waited. He watched the sea. He watched the wind. He watched the birds. Then, when the escort ships changed formation and the convoy altered course slightly, he did something subtle, almost invisible. He dumped the scraps behind the convoy's previous path. Not all at once, not carelessly. Small amounts, spaced out, deliberate. Within minutes, the gulls arrived, exactly as he expected. They circled, screamed, dove into the water, creating a perfect illusion of life and activity where the convoy no longer was. Ahead of the convoy, nothing. No birds, no fish, no signs of disturbance. The ocean looked dead. Hours passed. Normally, this was the window when U-boats struck. But nothing happened. No torpedoes, no alarms, no explosions. That night, the convoy sailed on untouched. The sailors were confused. Some called it luck. Others whispered about miracles. The cook said nothing. The next day, he did it again. This time, he changed the pattern. Instead of dumping scraps once, he dumped them twice, at different distances and times, creating multiple false trails. Birds split into groups. The ocean surface looked busy in all the wrong places. If a U-boat commander was watching through a periscope, the message would be clear. The convoy is over there. Except it wasn't. That evening, sonar picked up something strange. A distant contact. Moving, then stopping, then moving again. The escort captain frowned. The contact never closed in. It wandered, like a predator, chasing a scent that kept disappearing. For the first time in weeks, the convoy reached its destination without losing a single ship. That's when the cook realized something critical. He wasn't just hiding convoys. He was exhausting U-boats. German submarines ran on limited fuel, limited batteries, limited air. Every hour spent following false signals drained their strength. Every wrong decision pushed them closer to surfacing, vulnerable, exposed, desperate. The cook refined his method. He learned how much waste was too much, how little was enough, how wind spread scent, how currents moved debris. He timed dumps to coincide with course changes. He used night darkness to amplify confusion. He exploited the enemy's patience, and then punished it. Still, no one officially noticed. Officers were too busy surviving. Commanders credited evasive maneuvers. Analysts wrote reports full of technical explanations. But among the sailors, rumors spread. Ever notice the birds are always in the wrong place now? Strange how attacks stopped after waste dumping changed. Maybe the sea's finally on our side. One escort captain eventually pulled the cook aside, not to accuse him, to ask a question. P. You ever notice anything unusual out there? The cook paused. He chose his words carefully. U-boats look for signs, sir, he said. So I make sure they see the wrong ones. The captain stared at him. Then he laughed, quietly. Don't tell anyone, he said. Just keep doing what you're doing. And so without orders, without doctrine, without a single line written in a manual, an insane idea became an unspoken tactic. Convoys grew harder to find. U-boat attacks dropped in certain sectors. German commanders complained of vanishing targets. The ocean hadn't changed, but the signals on its surface had, and the cook was just getting started. Because misleading U-boats was one thing, but soon he would realize he could do something even more dangerous. He could make them chase ghosts. By mid-war, German U-boat commanders were no longer confident hunters. They were confused. Patrol after patrol returned with the same complaint. Convoys were expected, but never found. Periscopes rose over empty seas. Birds circled where ships should have been. Floating scraps promised targets that simply weren't there. At first, command blamed bad weather. Then, poor coordination. Then, cowardice. But excuses ran out quickly when fuel consumption skyrocketed and kill counts plummeted. U-boats were chasing signs that led nowhere. Inside German naval headquarters, officers began reviewing patrol logs side by side. Something strange appeared. Whenever bird activity was strong, convoys were absent. Whenever the sea looked lifeless, Allied ships slipped through untouched. This went against everything submariners had been taught. Birds were supposed to mean ships. Scraps were supposed to mean carelessness. Patterns were supposed to be reliable. Now the patterns were lying. Some officers whispered about Allied deception tactics. Others suggested new technologies the Germans hadn't detected yet. Radar, air reconnaissance, broken codes. But one analyst proposed a far more unsettling idea. What if the enemy is manipulating the ocean itself? The room went quiet. Manipulating nature sounded absurd. But war had already shattered many certainties. Orders went out quietly. U-boat commanders were instructed to be cautious around surface signs. Do not rush toward bird activity. Observe longer. Confirm with multiple indicators. And for a short time, it worked. A few U-boats avoided traps. Some returned safely after long, fruitless patrols. Confidence slowly began to rebuild, but the cook noticed the change immediately. Birds gathered as expected. Scraps drifted perfectly. But attacks didn't come. The sea felt watched. The cook understood what was happening. The enemy was learning, so he adapted. He began creating layers of deception. Instead of a single false trail, he created several. Some strong, some weak, some that faded quickly. He timed scrap dumping with wind shifts, letting currents carry the signs naturally. To a German commander, the ocean now looked contradictory. Too many signals, too much noise. Which sign was real? The result was hesitation, and hesitation is deadly in submarine warfare. U-boats began surfacing too late or in the wrong places. Escorts spotted periscopes at awkward angles. Aircraft arrived just as submarines were recharging batteries. Losses began to rise again. German command responded with a desperate countermeasure. They ordered U-boats to dump their own waste, food scraps, debris, anything that would draw birds, in order to confuse Allied escorts and pollute the signal space. It was a clever idea, and a fatal mistake. Because now, the cook could read the enemy's fear. Natural scraps produced calm feeding. Artificial scraps caused chaos. Birds fought harder. Patterns were tighter. The timing felt wrong. To the cook, it was obvious. A frightened submarine was nearby. He quietly shared this insight with one escort captain. "Real birds don't argue," he said. "When they do, someone's hiding." From that point on, escorts knew exactly where to look. The ocean became a hall of mirrors for the Germans. Every attempt to hide only revealed them further. Inside U-boats, morale collapsed. Commanders no longer trusted their instincts. Sailors stared upward in fear, listening for aircraft engines that always seemed to arrive at the worst moment. They had trained for technology. They had trained for weapons. They had not trained for being deceived by birds. And still, the Germans believed there must be a mastermind behind it all. Some officer, some scientist, some intelligence unit. They never imagined the truth, that the man undoing them didn't wear a uniform of rank. He wore an apron, and the most dangerous part of his plan was still ahead. Because soon, one U-boat commander would stop trying to avoid the deception and decide to reverse it. Not every German commander panics when the rules change. Some adapt. Kapitän zur See Otto Reinhardt was one of them. He had spent months reading patrol reports that made no sense. Convoys that should have been easy targets vanished. Birds lied. The sea contradicted itself. Younger officers blamed Allied tricks. Older ones blamed fate. Reinhardt blamed thinking. "The enemy isn't hiding ships," he said. "They're hiding signals." That sentence changed everything. Instead of asking where the convoys were, Reinhardt asked a different question. If I were misleading submarines, how would I do it? The answer disturbed him. You wouldn't fight technology with technology. You wouldn't fight sonar with sonar. You would fight expectation. Reinhardt became obsessed with waste logs, something most commanders ignored. He noticed when Allied convoys slowed dumping, when patterns changed, when birds appeared after ships had already altered course. This wasn't random. It was intentional. So Reinhardt made a radical decision. He stopped chasing birds. Instead, he followed absence. Dead water. No birds. No debris. No surface life. Places that looked empty were suddenly suspicious. On his next patrol, Reinhardt ignored a massive cluster of birds to the west, exactly where doctrine told him to go. Instead, he steered east into lifeless water. Hours passed. Then his hydrophones picked it up. Propellers, multiple ships, a convoy. For the first time in weeks, a U-boat had broken through the deception. But Reinhardt didn't attack. Not yet. He watched. He studied how long the convoy stayed invisible. When escorts maneuvered, when scraps suddenly appeared far behind the ships. And then he understood the final layer of the cook's idea. The cook wasn't just hiding convoys. He was stretching the ocean, turning one convoy into many false ghosts. Reinhardt smiled. If deception could be learned, it could be reversed. So he tried something dangerous. Instead of avoiding false signals, he amplified them. Reinhardt ordered controlled waste dumping, not randomly, but in rhythm with allied patterns. He used currents to push scraps where escorts expected lies, forcing them to reposition. Then he went silent. No periscope, no radio, no surface activity. The escorts grew nervous. They chased birds. They chased ripples. They chased nothing. Meanwhile, Reinhardt slipped past. For 2 days, he shadowed the convoy unseen. Back on the Allied escort, tension rose. Birds were everywhere. Too many. The ocean was noisy with false signs. Sonar contacts appeared, disappeared, reappeared. The cook sensed it immediately. This wasn't confusion. This was counter-deception. Someone on the other side had learned the language. He approached the escort captain and spoke quietly. "Sir, someone's listening to the wrong signals on purpose." The captain frowned. "You're saying the enemy knows what we're doing?" The cook nodded. "Then we stop teaching," he said. That night, the cook did something radical. He stopped dumping scraps entirely. No waste, no signals, no birds. The ocean went silent. Reinhardt noticed. Too silent. Life doesn't vanish naturally. He knew immediately. The cook had changed the rules again. Reinhardt surfaced at night to recharge batteries. Just once, just briefly. That was enough. Radar caught him. Aircraft were launched. Depth charges followed. The sea exploded around the U-boat. Reinhardt ordered a crash dive, but it was too late. His boat was damaged, batteries failing, air running thin. For the first time, he understood the truth. This wasn't a battle of weapons. It was a battle of attention, and the cook had mastered it. Reinhardt's U-boat limped away, barely surviving. He would never break through again. From that moment on, German command accepted the reality they had resisted. The ocean could no longer be trusted, and without trust, U-boats were blind. But the war wasn't over yet. One final question remained. Would this insane idea stay a quiet secret, or would it reshape naval warfare forever? The Atlantic did not announce when it changed sides. There was no single battle, no dramatic headline, no moment commanders could point to and say, "This is when it ended." But slowly, unmistakably, the war beneath the waves began to tilt. Convoys started arriving intact. Loss reports grew thinner. German U-boat patrols returned empty, exhausted, and confused. The ocean had become unreliable. For years, U-boat commanders had trusted the surface of the sea more than any machine. Birds, debris, scraps, these were signs that had never lied before. They were older than sonar, older than radar, older than submarines themselves. And now, they were useless. German command poured resources into technology. New hydrophones, new tactics, tighter discipline. But none of it restored what had been lost. Confidence. Because the problem was no longer detection. It was interpretation. The cook continued his work quietly. He didn't attend briefings. He didn't write reports. He simply adjusted. Sometimes he dumped scraps. Sometimes he didn't. Sometimes he delayed waste for hours, then released it all at once, far from the convoy's true path. The goal was no longer to fool a single submarine. It was to make every signal questionable. And that uncertainty spread like a disease. U-boat commanders hesitated. Hesitation led to missed opportunities. Missed opportunities drained fuel, morale, and time. The Atlantic is unforgiving to submarines that waste time. Soon, German patrols spent more effort avoiding traps than hunting ships. Escorts, once reactive, became proactive. Aircraft coverage improved. The balance tipped. Historians would later credit many factors: better coordination, improved air patrols, long-range escorts. All of that was true. But something else had happened quietly, invisibly. The enemy had lost the ability to read the ocean. When the war finally ended, the cook returned home without ceremony. No medals waited for him, no official citations, no debriefings. He went back to civilian life, to kitchens, to ordinary meals, to a world that would never know how close the Atlantic had come to being lost. Years later, naval strategists began talking about a new concept: deception environments. The idea that warfare wasn't just about hiding forces, but about corrupting the information an enemy relies on. About flooding their senses with noise until nothing feels trustworthy. They wrote papers. They taught courses. They developed doctrines. None of them mentioned a cook. But the idea was already there, proven. The cook had shown that you don't always need to destroy the enemy's weapons. Sometimes, you destroy their confidence in their instincts. One veteran escort captain would later say something that never made it into official history. "We didn't beat the U-boats by finding them faster," he said. "We beat them by making them doubt what they were seeing. And doubt is fatal underwater. Because submarines live on decisions. Surface or stay down. Chase or wait. Attack or disappear. Every wrong decision shortens survival." The insane idea worked because it didn't fight strength with strength. It fought expectation with understanding. The cook never claimed. The cook never claimed. Credit. When asked years later if the stories were true, if scraps really helped save convoys, he shrugged. "I didn't stop the U-boats," he said. "I just stopped them from knowing where to look." And maybe that's the most dangerous lesson of all. That in war, the smallest details matter. The quietest people can change everything. And sometimes, the line between survival and destruction is nothing more than a handful of scraps drifting on the sea. Because once the enemy can no longer trust the signs, they are already lost.